Well, welcome in, everybody. Another edition of the Ferrario Face-Off here on Claibs Online. I'm Alex Ferrario, the pre- and post-game host for the St. Louis Blues on the radio side, joined as always by my good buddy Mike Claiborne, and hockey expert, I like to call him when we get the chance to talk. And Claibs, opening night, buddy, we are finally here where, to be honest with you, I don't know if a lot of people expected that this point was going to get here at any time.
Yeah, and while we're just a few hours away from face-off, it's still up in the air. I mean, we've already had a couple of postponements, but we're getting close. The Blues are finally going to play. They're in Colorado, and I guess that's a good start. But man, it just seems like, Alex, this offseason took forever, and we're finally here. A lot of changes, not only the format, the roster. And I'm just looking forward to them playing at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, you went into this offseason not knowing if there was going to be a season, not knowing how the NHL would survive with no fans in the buildings. And, Gary Bettman spoke yesterday, Claibs, and I'm sure you heard kind of some of his comments, but the biggest one that was taken away was the fact that he said financially it would be smarter for the NHL to say, you know what, we're just not going to have a season and we'll wait till next year. But he said a lot of the owners recognize that you have to buck up and say, look, we're going to take a financial hit this year, but for the betterment of our business and for the betterment of the NHL, let's do this season so that by the postseason and by next year, we still have that fan support at an all-time high and we can get these guys back on the ice and fans back in the building.
Well, I think it's a paramount move to continue to play. This league is gaining momentum around the world, not just in the U.S. and Canada, but around the world. And to step away from it just wouldn't have been healthy for the betterment of the league. These owners have ways of getting extra cash if they need it, if they have to deal with the banks. I mean, investing in a National Hockey League team would be a good investment, I think. So they're going to move forward. We don't know what the end's going to look like. I think we'll have fans in the buildings at some point here in the future. And I think that's key. And this is a league that's about to go into a new TV deal or negotiations for a new TV deal. We know that NBC wants to be involved. ESPN apparently is kicking the tires as well. So if they get another partner, and I think this is something that's important for them, Alex, they probably need to branch out and have multiple TV partners. You see it with baseball. You see it with the NFL. The NBA is doing it. And I think the NHL needs to expand the scope beyond just NBC and its family of networks. So to have ESPN perhaps as a partner, maybe Fox wants to kick the tires on it again, but I think they need to expand the partnerships and making sure that they continue to get their brand out there to their viewers and their fans.
And, Claibs, they're a hot commodity right now. I mean, you just had Vegas come in with the expansion draft. You have Seattle that's entering next season. The NHL is a hot commodity. And while you were talking, I'm sitting here thinking, what a ways we have come in hockey, Claibs. Go back 15 years ago. You remember the hockey games on the channel Versus?
Oh, I remember before that. Was it Sports Channel?
Yeah, it was Sports Channel.
It was Sports Channel before Versus, and everybody was mad because nobody had that channel.
Right.
It was tough.
And it was a hunting channel. All of the programming was hunting and racing. There was no hockey until at 7:00 at night. Doc Emmerich saying, "Welcome into hockey." It's like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah, it was tough.
Look at where we're at now, though. I mean, you do have ESPN fighting NBC to get the rights, and I agree. If you want to take the NHL from where it's at now, because you're building the brand, but I also think you're starting to see the sports betting side into the NHL, and Gary Bettman has been at the forefront of this. Now with a team in Vegas, I mean, you branch out to have networks that want to get involved and start to build channels. You could take this NHL from what some people look at it as kind of a throwaway league to one of the premier top sports leagues.
Well, the gambling thing has put everybody back in the ball game. Hockey is not a big betting sport, but I think because now it's readily available, or it will be, I think they will certainly get some legs to it. And hopefully these leagues will capitalize on that as well, not just with sponsorships, but maybe being partners with the casinos and the gambling outlets to make sure there's other revenue off the ice. I'm not telling them hey, this is when we throw games or any of that sort of foolishness, but just making sure that they're partners in this and they can continue to grow the sport and grow that industry together. And who would have thunk it 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago that the gambling impact as far as the sports betting is concerned would have such an impact on sports. And I think it's the last true revenue stream that sports leagues can have. You had the stadiums, then you had the luxury suites, then you had the local TV deals, and then you had the national TV deals, and now you have sports betting. I'm not sure what the next major revenue stream will be, so we'll have to live with this one for a while.
Well, and that's just it. You got to commend what Gary Bettman and company have done. I know not a lot of people were happy with the logos on the helmets or the renaming of the divisions, but at the end of the day, that's going to save. And I heard one of the broadcasters mention this. If that saves our jobs for this season going into next year, then we'll deal with it and then move forward after that. So you have to commend the brilliance of the front office with the NHL.
Now, can you let us know that this is just a rumor I'm hearing that the Ferrario family is willing to slap some sort of logo on the new baby when it comes into the world, just in order to enhance revenue within the Ferrario family and certainly the National Hockey League. Any truth to that?
There's truth to that, because I've been saying since college, Claibs, I'll tattoo whatever you want on this forehead if we can make sure that revenue's there. So yeah, the baby Ferrario, she'll take care of whatever we need to take care of. I'll put that out there right now.
Nothing like having some new diapers sponsored by you know who. So I like it.
We'll tattoo that on whatever we need to.
All right.
Claibs, let's talk about on the ice for the Blues, because the last scrimmage that they had was on Sunday. They practiced on they had the day off Monday. They practiced Tuesday, and then it was wheels up Tuesday to get to Colorado for tonight's game. And the roster decisions came out on Tuesday. And if you look at what the Blues have done, I think it's really interesting, because this is the cap wizardry that Doug Armstrong pulls off. The taxi squad has 5 guys, and a couple of those guys are one-way contracts. Mackenzie McEachran, Jacob De La Rose, Nico Mikkola, Jordan Kairu's on that taxi squad. But what that does is that takes advantage of this LTIR cap space so that they could sign Mike Hoffman to a $4 million deal. And honestly, if you look at where the Blues are at, I think this is about as deep of a roster, Claibs, as I can remember. And I mean, I'm saying this with the 2018-19 Cup team. I think this team is deeper.
Well, you'd have to go back to maybe one of those Ken Hitchcock teams.
Yeah.
That was pretty good. They were pretty deep, but I would agree with you. And they're going to have to be deep, because somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to get infected, and you're going to have to be able to dig in the well and bring up somebody who can not just give you minutes. They've got to be able to contribute. And it's going to be important to make sure they maintain that. I talked to Kevin Weeks earlier today about the fact that if you're a general manager, you better have a degree, if not a master's degree, in capology. And your assistant better be pretty darn smart also. This is where the game is headed, between managing the cap and also understanding and being able to apply analytics, and having a coach who gets it, but also, and I think, Alex, it's going to be important to keep it simple early.
Yeah.
If you have that combination, then you have a legitimate chance. If you want to be careless with the cap, because it's going to be flat for the next year or two, if you're going to be careless, then you're going to find yourself in big trouble. And if you don't have a system that's reasonably simple, where it's going to rely on skill and having the assets that and what they can contribute to your team, you're going to be on the outside looking in quicker than you think.
Yeah, no longer, in my opinion, in the next 3 years, Claibs, can teams run the way that the Edmonton Oilers are running right now. You cannot run a team right now with this flat cap with 2 superstars and then hope to plug and play guys around. Teams like the Blues, teams like the Colorado Avalanche, teams like the Pittsburgh Penguins, they're going to be the ones that are going to be successful, because yes, they have high-priced players, but they know that it's a win by committee. It's not a win by one line. And I think with a flat cap, that's the NHL now.
Well, Edmonton can pull it off if they do one thing. If they've drafted well, and remember, this is a team that found themselves in the lottery quite a bit over the last few years.
Every year.
If they drafted well, then maybe they have some kids that can help them. I don't know. I haven't seen enough of them or their organization. Oh, I'm sorry, we're talking hockey now. Organization that would lend me to believe that they have enough players like that. But if they don't, your point is exactly what's going to get them in trouble. And you know what? It kind of reminds me of where the Chicago Blackhawks were a few years ago. Remember, they kind of ran that route, and then all of a sudden their well was dry. They didn't have really good draft picks. They were capped out, and they moved some good players. You don't think they'd like to have Panarin back right now? Amen. I mean, there's a lot of players that they've distributed around the National Hockey League that they just couldn't afford because they didn't manage the cap. I think the Blues took a long look at that, and I think they put themselves in a position where they can certainly compete and compete maybe for the next 3 to 4 years. They're going to have this again to deal with, but by then maybe things will be a little bit more flexible. The cap will have a little bit more spending money. You'll have the emergence of some other players that can fill some voids. So it's going to be good. But as far as this team is concerned, I think that they're deep. And you know, and when I'm talking about deep, I'm talking about having third and fourth line guys that can make a real contribution, not just eat up a shift, not just kill a penalty, but give you some goal scoring, can give you a little bit of an edge in certain situations. And when you kill penalties, have that ability to score shorthanded goals. You know, special team play today is going to be highlighted more than ever before. And if you don't have special team players, and we're talking about 2 power play units, so basically, let's say 10 guys, 11 guys that you're going to need for your power play. And you're going to need a couple of penalty killers that can actually do some things and score a goal and make the other team maybe take a bad penalty. Nothing worse than taking a penalty on the offense when you're on the power play and you take a bad penalty. The Blues have that ability to draw that sort of penalty, and that's going to bode well for them down the road.
You bring up a great topic, Claibs, that I think we have to talk about. It's secondary scoring. If you look at the Blues in the last 3 years, when they were successful was when they had a third line that could score goals. The Cup team that had Maroon and Thomas and Bozak. Last year, the Blues still finished first in their conference, but they struggled because when guys like O'Reilly or Tarasenko or Schwartz or Schenn weren't scoring goals, they were searching for help. Yeah. This season, I think if you look at this Blues third line, Claibs, of Zach Sanford, Tyler Bozak, Jordan Kyrou, which is what it's expected against the Avalanche, if you go to any other team right now that's not the Avalanche or the Vegas Golden Knights that are set up, they would take one of those 3 guys in their top 6 position. And I might be the optimistic right here. I might be on the hype train. But I got to tell you, Claibs, from watching Jordan Kyrou in these 2 scrimmages, I think he and Zach Sanford are about to have a breakout season for St. Louis.
Well, you saw more of them than I did. I think I'm going to give it some time. I think we've got to play a couple of weeks, maybe 10 games in order to really get a feel. And I think the way Craig Berube works, he's going to juggle some lines a little bit. And I know sometimes that can be frustrating for a fan, but I think he's still going to continue to look for combinations because the other teams, you know, we don't know what they look like. We don't know what kind of shape they're in. We don't know what combinations they're going to play back and forth with. So I think we're still going to be on a fact-finding mission for at least 8 to 10 games to figure out exactly what we have. And it's good that Kyrou has gotten off to a good start. He's caught the eye of the coaching staff. He's caught the eye of people like yourself. And so is Zach Sanford. This is a guy we've been waiting on to make that next step. And maybe this is the year. When you start the season with confidence, like everybody else in hockey, but when you can break through and have some early success and maybe keep a combination, keep a pair together or whatever the case may call for, that certainly is going to help you down the road, and it's going to give you an opportunity to continue to get minutes. And the more minutes you get, the more effective you can be. I mean, we're talking about 2 guys who put on some muscle, who should be able to bang. And let's face it, the Blues, as we've been told, they're going to play a heavy game. And if you're not willing to play heavy, then you won't play. And I think that's something that these 2 guys have bought into, and we'll see what they can do. But they also have to be able to do some things in their own end. You know, we've learned, you know, if you can't play defense in your own end and come back and help out, you probably won't get the next shift. So that's something I'm anxious to see how they fare also.
Yeah, you'll be a liability. And frankly, that's what Jordan Kyrou was last season. He was a liability when he got shots. And when he made a mistake, Craig Berube sat him on the bench. And I think that took a shot to the confidence. But, you know, the confidence is something that has stuck out to me with Jordan Kyrou. Craig Berube said something after that second scrimmage, and he said Kyrou's finishing. And part of me is like, okay, what does that mean? But if you think about it, he scores 2 goals, yes. But that's not the finishing Craig Berube's talking about. He finishes his plays. He finishes when the offense is in the zone, and he's on a consistent rush. He doesn't just skate off the ice while his team is still working. He finishes his checks. He finishes his plays. If you want the confidence of a Craig Berube and Steve Ott, Mike Van Ryn, Jim Montgomery staff, you got to go out there and play every shift like you just jumped onto the ice, like you're going to lose that role. And I think what's worked for Jordan Kyrou is the fact that Sammy Blais, Mackenzie McEachran, Jacob De La Rose, I know these guys sound like fourth-line players, but they can play this Craig Berube system. Kyrou knows that these guys are nipping at his heels, and I think he's taken that and he's run with it with the confidence that he's gotten from this coaching staff.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think also what comes into play, the fact that you mentioned he's looking over his shoulder and these guys are giving it all they have also. So
right.
I like that sort of competition. And I think it's going to bode well for this team. And it goes back to what you touched on earlier, depth. And that's where it starts with guys like that. I don't think any of us should worry about the top 6 guys, all right?
Right.
And when you look around the league, especially when you think about the 2 teams in your own conference in Colorado and Vegas, they're saying the same thing in their cities right now too.
Right.
So it's ours against them, and we'll see who can do best. Some guys are going to win shifts, some guys are going to lose shifts. But I think the games are going to be decided from those bottom 2 lines as far as offense is concerned, and how the Blues stack up. You know, Colorado, everybody tells me that they're just as deep as the Blues are, maybe better.
Right.
They feature Nathan McKinnon, who's one of the best players in the game, and there's some guys that he plays with that are going to be contagious. So, you know, it's just going to be a lot of fun. I think one of the other elements that the Blues have to concentrate on is beating the West Coast team, the California teams.
Right.
And, you know, because that's where you're going to make your hay, because all 3 of those teams are still trying to grow in Anaheim, San Jose, and the Kings. They're trying to figure it out. So you better pounce on them while you can, but you better respect them along the way also, because they're fighting for jobs and they're trying to impress their coaches as well. But let me run this question by you. You know, we've seen the Blues play each other. Mm-hmm. Where do you separate being familiar with the other guys and also being able to make sure your conditioning is in the right space? Because I thought last year in the playoffs, the Blues weren't in shape. They really weren't ready physically. And I think physically it translated to mental letdowns. Mm-hmm. So where do you see that separation of saying, okay, I think these guys are at a good place compared to what I saw last year and how they ended their season in the playoffs?
You know, it's hard to say you see it in person, and like it doesn't pass the eye test, Claibs, because there are some guys that are letting up in scrimmage. And what I mean by that is
they're not running a guy. Yeah, they're not running guys and things of that nature.
Colton Parayko's not going to tee up 105-mile-an-hour slap shot at one of his own guys, because you don't want to deal with that. But there was some physical play in that second scrimmage on Sunday night. Now, I noticed it a couple of times. You know, a line like Kyle Clifford and Oscar Sundqvist and Ivan Barbashev, they're going to play a very heavy game, and they look like they're in condition for that. Same with the defensive unit. The part that separates the eye test from believing this team's ready to go, Claibs, is what I'm hearing from them. If you go back to that bubble play last year, you know, they knew that things weren't where it needed to be. But everything we were told was, well, this team knows how to turn it on when they need to. We'll be able to. This team knows how to play postseason hockey. We know we'll get back to our game once we hit the ice. They're not saying that right now. Like Ryan O'Reilly is not going on to the media sessions and saying, well, we feel we're ready to go. We've done this before. We just want to cut. They're saying that it was bad in the bubble. They're ticked off about it. And that's why they've put in the extra effort at practice. And I've seen it. I mean, a couple of these practices, Claibs, over at Centene, it's not just, oh, well, let's pass the puck around and practice our shooting. No, Friday at Centene, it was turbo mode, like do not stop until the Craig Berube or the coaches blow the whistle. They're trying to make sure that speed's there. These guys know that they have to get to their game fast with no preseason action. So frankly, for me, I think this team is going to be hungrier than the team that was in the bubble last year, than the team that won their conference last year. And I'm going off of that because of what I'm seeing on the ice and practices, but more importantly, what I'm hearing them tell us in these media sessions.
Well, I'll take it one step further. I think what you see in practice and what you're not seeing is the Ryan O'Reillys and the Torrey Krug staying after, working on certain things when they get on the power play.
Yeah.
Seeing extra guys stay out for extra time, working on little things compared to saying, all right, boys, practice is over. Let's go get a beer. We're not seeing that.
Right.
And I think we saw with Ryan O'Reilly since he's been here, how dedicated he is. And that can become contagious with other players. And if you're Torrey Krug, you want to learn how this thing works. And it says a lot about his commitment. So I'm excited about that. I'm not worried about it because I know that the effort is going to be there, and it starts at the top with those guys. So we'll be in good shape. Hey, I want to ask you about this. Give me another player. And you know, we've heard about Hoffman being a unique goal scorer. I know about him, but give me another player that you kind of paid attention to that you think is going to be a bigger contributor than maybe he's been penciled in to be.
Yeah, one sticks out right away, Claibs. Niko Mikkola. I have heard from Craig Berube. I've heard from Mike Van Ryn. I've heard from Jamie Rivers that this guy is the real deal. He will be in the NHL at some point this season as an everyday regular player, if not for next season. And you know, the part that sticks out to me, Claibs, is his teammates want him to succeed. Most of the time when you see some of these younger guys in the practices, you know, there's not much there. You just expect them to go out there and push really hard. But Mikkola, in both scrimmages, the first one he scored a goal, but the second one he created an offensive opportunity. And the entire bench, his teammates, stood up and were slapping the sticks on the bench. That to me screams this is a guy that the teammates want to fight for. Bill Armstrong, who's now the GM over in Arizona, he was the head of the scouting side for the Blues for such a long time. He told Curbs, Joey, and I in the past that this guy is like a dog on the bone with the puck on the ice. When he's out there, he's physical, he's big, he's fast, but he's got an offensive upside. So it's going to be hard for him to get to that NHL opportunity at the beginning because
Stay ready.
You're going to have it. But Vince Dunn's going to be in there. You got Carl Gunnarsson, who is a very reliable defenseman as the seventh guy. But if I'm a Blues fan, I want to see more of Niko Mikkola because I'm telling you, this guy is going to be a top six defenseman in the near future for the Blues.
I'll tell you the guy I'm looking forward to watching him contribute is Kyle Clifford. The one thing the Blues lacked last year was a physical presence. I saw Petro get knocked around too much, especially when it came to Dallas and even Vancouver. Clifford is a guy that's going to make you accountable. You know, in his experience, he's won 2 cups. I think that leadership role, especially on that end of the ice, that end of the bench, is going to be very, very important. Is he going to fight? I'm sure he will. But I think just his physical presence alone and being willing. See, the Blues didn't have many guys who were willing last year. They were willing to get in the way, but they didn't have a guy who certifiably could drop the gloves and make somebody pay a price for running one of our better players. So I'm anxious to see what he can do. He can score the occasional goal. So that's a guy that I'm looking for. And again, as you see, I'm going back to the third and fourth lines and their importance. And I think he's going to be a guy we're going to have to certainly pay a lot of attention to.
Well, you have to find somebody who can replace Alexander Steen. And I'm not saying Kyle Clifford can be that guy, but you need a leader like Alexander Steen. You got a lot of them, but I like Kyle Clifford in the sense that he plays that lead by example style that Steen used to. He goes out there and he is physical. And, you know, we talked with Gary Lawless on our midday show last week, kind of previewing this matchup with the Blues in Vegas this season. And he said the difference is Ryan Reeves, because Ryan Reeves can do whatever he wants on the ice. His teammates can do whatever they want on the ice, and they know that they can get away with it. The Blues have that now. Doug Armstrong talked about it. He asked the Blues players after the season, you know, what is this team lacking? And he said a majority of those guys said, we need a physical aspect. We need a guy like Pat Maroon. We were missing that this past year. What'd they do? They went out and they got a Kyle Clifford. I'm expecting that fourth line to be very effective this season, and I'm thinking Kyle Clifford is going to be one of the reasons why.
Well, you know, and let's talk about Barbashev for a minute. That's a guy that they missed, and he loves to bang. And I think with a guy like Clifford out there with him, Barbashev is going to be a bitch to play against, okay? He's going to be hard to play against because he can skate, he can bang, he can yap, and he's got skill. I mean, so I think that he's going to up the level of skill for everybody. To be able to contribute. And again, I go back to offense. If these guys can scrape up a few goals along the way and just make them playing against them difficult.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a real game changer for the Blues. Hey, before we get out of here, goaltending, you're not concerned about Bennington and what you saw?
No, I'm not. The Athletic put an article out, Claibs, that has him as the 13th ranked goaltender right now in the league, and I just don't agree with that. I think you're looking at a guy who's top 10 goalie right now, and I understand bubble play wasn't good, but you know what also wasn't good, Claibs? The entire team in front of him. Like, the defense was not the same. The offense wasn't the same. They weren't in condition. Binnington looked like a guy, and you'll appreciate this. Binnington, to me, looked like a Ed Belfour, Dominic Hasek, Marty Brodeur in practice. He got a goal scored on him in that first scrimmage game, Claibs. And mind you, this is your own teammates. Binnington looked about as pissed as he would have been if a guy scored on him in the 7th game of the Stanley Cup final.
Well, you know, one of the things I noticed about Bennington last year, and I've talked to you about this, I thought he was a guy that was big on fundamentals and his mechanics, you know, keeping his glove in the right place, making sure he was upright, being big where he didn't give you much to shoot at. He got away from that a little bit. He got a little sloppy, let his arms spread out a little bit. He had some goals getting scored between his ribs and his elbow.
Yeah.
You know, if he goes back to just being the fundamentally sound goaltender that we saw when he first got here, he's going to be fine. I'm not worried about him. Ville Husso, we've heard a lot about him, haven't seen enough of him. I'll worry about him later when he gets a chance to start and gets a chance to get some NHL rubber on him. But, you know, I'm not going to worry about the Blues goaltending, and I think you touched on something. He's going to be as good as the guys in front of him. If they come back and play, they're going to be fine. If they start playing fire wagon hockey, then he's going to be a shooting gallery target, and that's something that the Blues can't win at this point, especially when you open up against a game Colorado club.
Yeah, you can't get exposed. And that's the biggest thing. He was exposed in the bubble, and I'm going to be intrigued with that. I'll tell you this, Claves, before we wrap up. The internal competition at goaltender, if you don't think that there's a competition right now between those two guys, you're sadly mistaken, because don't forget, Ville Husso was supposed to be Jordan Binnington 2 years ago.
You're right.
He was injured. These guys played together in the American Hockey League. Binnington was the one that got shipped to Providence because they wanted to see what Ville Husso was all about.
Yeah, so you're right.
There's going to be internal competition this season, man, and I'm looking forward to watching those two guys go out there and perform when they get their opportunities.
All right, man. Well, I'm looking forward to you and I doing this on a regular basis. We'll talk between games between the Blues and Colorado. It's going to be a fun season, and I'm glad you're on board. I want to thank you for listening. Everybody out there, thank you for Alex Ferrario. I'm Mike Claiborne. This has been another edition of the Ferrario Face-Off on ClaibsOnline.com. All righty.